Hey, I'm Tom,
And I'm Josh.
and this is the BlockCast.
We're Lego fans. Click.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. I've seen that book before. It's the Lego story, so that means we're talking Lego history once again because I have
Yay!
my inappropriate copy of the book here.
In today's episode of Unnecessary Blurring.
Ta-da! I'll fix that. But we are talking the Lego story. If you
Well,
haven't
I guess he
already,
does look like he's not wearing any clothes.
true. Got to cover that. Not family friendly. Um, if you haven't already, we have a series going. It's called Lego History. I'll tell you the chapters. We already covered chapters 1 and chapter 2. We have a book club going. Join our book club. We are talking chapters 3 and chapters 4 today of the Lego story, which is a complete history of not only the Lego company, but its founders.
But how a little toy sparked the world's imagination?
The only thing that's not blurred is him. I'll have to fix that. So we are on chapter 3. And chapter 3 starts in a very epic way that we've never seen before with this family in their history. And if you can guess what I'm talking about, let me know in the comments down below because I bet Josh knows how chapter 3 begins. It's as most chapters we've seen so far.
It's true. The recurring theme of this book so far is just how much of a, what would you say, hot property the Lego brand is.
Well, that's what happens when you work with wood, Josh, apparently. All the
I mean,
time.
Ole Kirk's methods were truly fire.
I'm telling you, this book is lit, everybody. Their whole factory caught on fire again.
Again, again, for those keeping track at home, the factory has caught fire almost as many times as Tom misspoke in the early days of the BlockCast.
Yes, if you're unfamiliar, please go back and watch those episodes where I was so excited to talk about Lego, I pronounced it with an S. And Josh adds a notch to the Lego with an S board every single time I say it now.
But it has been multiple episodes, probably at least 7, since either one of us. I've slipped up too, but since either of us have made that mistake.
I had to go to therapy. It was a lot. I don't like to talk about it. So yeah, we are back with Ole Kirk and his son, and they're in their factory, and it caught on fire again. But don't worry, back then you could build factories, no problem, no questions asked. And he went ahead and built an even bigger factory this is like what, 19, I think it was like 1939, 1940 that this happened. And this is like
Perfect time to industrialize
right at the brink
in
of the
Europe.
beginning of World War II.
Yep.
So Ole Kirk is expanding his business. We learned in the last chapters that he wasn't doing so well. The toy industry was getting up, it was getting going. Because remember, kids didn't play with toys, they had a job by the time they turned 9. So toys at that point in time were a new thing.
Yeah. And particularly as war broke out, resources weren't necessarily there to go toward toy making, and it was called upon anyone with the ability to do so to aid in the war effort with whatever resources or abilities that they had. So whereas a lot of the the lumber and the wood that Old Kirk had for his toy making was needed, and it became very difficult during the war to maintain the resources, have the time, and kind of continue with his business. Which, when you've rebuilt your factory now for 3 times and have invested heavily in all kinds of materials and machinery and that sort of thing, puts a little damper on the pocketbook when you're not able to churn out your primary product.
Don't worry, it only gets easy for Ole Kirk. I'm telling you, this guy is one of those that has a like cloud over his head every step of the way. At the end of the day, he was a very positively focused person, but for the
Hmm.
amount of "Ugh," that happened to this man constantly, all the time, it's like insane. Like
Yes.
because we talk about limited resources, but not only was it limited resources, but the facility that he had just built was eyed by the Germans who occupied Billund at this point, closer to 1943. And they said, "Hey, Olkart, guess what? We're going to occupy your factory because it makes for great barracks." Great. He's just like,
Yeah.
perfect. This is exactly what I needed because Olkirk did not side with the Germans during World War II. He was on the opposite side secretly while being occupied and helping the Allies during World War II. But now he had to do it under the scrutiny and under the vision of literally the German soldiers that lived within the confines of his factory while producing wooden toys on a limited budget with no resources, using scraps of wood.
It would be difficult for most to maintain their positivity during this, but Old Kirk, he had faith. He had his vision. He knew what he wanted from his company, so he maintained that positivity throughout. And I think as a result of that, honestly, it was a benefit following the war, because what came out of it was a symbol of peace.
Yep. Made out of wood. It was called the Peace Pistol. And
Yep. Nothing says peace like a pistol.
correct. And, the way they advertised it, it sold quite often and quite numerously. Now, remember, this is controversial because what does Lego not produce for its current toys?
Plastic?
If you know the answer, go ahead and put it down in the description below. Correct! Uh,
This is an
guns.
episode of Dora.
They don't produce guns. Or they try not to produce guns or weaponry. Like cannons, okay, it's pirates. But they don't produce guns, but yet they produce the Peace Pistol. Now, granted, this is something different. The Peace Pistol brought in a fair amount of money. It was a very big seller for them. But also during this time of being occupied, limited resources, people not having extra money to, you could buy literally the caps that could shoot and make sound and shoot.
They were wooden pellets, by
Yeah.
the way.
Yeah. Um, they took an astronomical amount of debt, and the Peace Pistol helped them kind of out of debt, but Olkirk needed an out. Like, he needed to figure out what he could do in order to make his production faster and less expensive.
Because the original run of the Peace Pistol were made out of wood.
Mm-hmm.
It had wooden components and springs and things like that. And it was very difficult for him and his still limited staff to maintain the amount of orders that they were getting, which is not a bad problem to have, but they couldn't keep up with the demand of it, and they were starting to look into different options that might be sustainable to aid in the general production of the Peace Pistol. And it started forcing Ulkirk to look into some alternate uh, methods.
Because at the end of the day, you have to remember during World War II, and we mentioned it before, the use of raw based materials was in high demand for wartime, not for extracurricular production, meaning toys, furniture, things of that nature. You had what you had until the end of the war because everything needed to go to the effort. But one thing
Yes.
that was developed during this time period by scientists was the beginnings of plastic and plastic molding and injection. They found it to be the wonder material. in which it comes in many forms. Like Lego is made out of ABS plastic. There's also a form of plastic called Bakelite. Bakelite is, you can find, if you ever wanted to find your own Bakelite, go look at old board games. It's a much more brittle plastic. It's a thicker plastic. It's less malleable than like ABS plastic, which can be blown and shaped to literally anything you'd like. And that's where Ole Kirk started to see people start to use it in certain production lines because it was a less expensive alternative that wasn't used within military production because it was too early.
And if you remember from our first episode, our first introduction to the Lego story, we talked about how Ole Kirk was uh, I guess the best term would be revolutionist. He was on the brink of the cutting technology. He was always ready to jump on board with the next big thing. He was one of the first people to have a car. I think he was the second person actually in Billund to have a car. He was one of the first to invest in a television set. He was at the forefront of whatever the emerging technology or the emerging materials were. So it stands to reason, and it's perfectly within character for him to say, "Hey, plastic, this perfectly untested thing that sounds like it could be the key to the future of the business. I'm going to go all in, and I'm going to buy a molding machine."
Correct. And with the molding machine, I believe he gets the first one from the United Kingdom.
Yeah, but it took too long, and he was impatient, and he had invested in the materials. So he ordered a second molding machine, I believe, from America.
Correct, which will definitely come faster than things that are going to be in the UK.
Yeah, definitely, because we know geography, and America is right there, and UK is way over here. Yeah.
The injection molding machine. With that, I believe it was his son-in-law that he wanted to bring this business forward and figure out what they could do to create production, like with the Peace Pistol. And the plastic molding machine, when it did arrive, was not placed in Billund, but actually placed in Copenhagen. If you haven't been to Copenhagen, go. It's really fun. And it's home to Tivoli Gardens and Michelin star restaurants. And
there's more bicycles than people.
Correct. It's like Ireland with sheep. But so his son-in-law, I believe, started beginning the early formation of plastic molding for Lego within a basement or his basement in Copenhagen because there wasn't an idea that it could be produced out in Billund. Because it was don't get me wrong, Ole Kirk did not want to be like everyone else. Copenhagen now is more tourist friendly, more open for residential, but back in Ole Kirk's time period, it was functional production city. It was a waterfront town. They did all their production and industry in Copenhagen, and it's still, all the buildings are redesigned for residential now, but they served a functional purpose for Denmark as an exporter. So they thought, oh, let's begin there. But Ole Kirk wholly believed about building away from that and wanting to build in Billund, but decided to put the plastic formation in Copenhagen due to the influence of his son-in-law, but saw the potential in it and wanted to grow it. But you know who didn't like plastic?
His son.
His son. Surprising, right? The younger generation didn't like the newer technology, yet his father was all for it.
Yes. So this causes some animosity between Ole Kirk and his son Gottfried, the oldest, I believe, of his three sons. He also had a daughter. So there's four siblings. All they're younger, but Gottfried is the one who's more involved in the Lego business. They all contributed in some form or fashion, but in terms of the business aspect and decision making and that sort of thing, it was Gottfried that kind of challenged Ole Kirk's ideas.
And this is when we had the idea of separation of business a little bit, where Ole Kirk started to realize that his business is now growing. We're close to the end of World War II. The German occupation is starting to move its way out. Yes, it was hard during it, but they're now moving out. They're producing plastic peace pistols. That's slowly on the decline, and they need to figure out their next move. And Ole Kirk believes that it's solely in plastic. Godfrey believes that it's solely in wood, and plastic is not what he wanted to do. So Ole Kirk decided that he wanted to expand and grow his business and maybe start to create a separation where Ole Kirk can take more of a new technology, new idea road, and Godfrey can be placed in charge of wood and the traditional sense of what Lego original production is. And that takes us close to the end of chapter 3.
Yes. Chapter 3 was entitled War, just for those of you who are following along. It actually was not labeled as chapter 3. It is chapter titled War.
What is it good for?
Absolutely nothing.
Exactly. We are now within chapter 4, and that is named
System.
System. But what could be named System? Okay, everybody. What could be named System? Let us know in the comments below. Correct! Now I know why Dora enjoyed this so much. It's called Lego System. We actually had sets up into the very early 90s that were still labeled here and there as Lego System. We are introduced at the beginning of chapter 4, or called System, into conflict. We continue that conflict that Godfrey and Ole Kirk had. Godfrey has just gotten married to the love of his life. Ole Kirk is so happy for his son. He wants to keep him going. Remember, Godfrey became a business partner to his father when he was 13 years old. 13! He didn't get to play with Lego. So the idea is that Ole Kirk's a little bit hard in the head, and Godfrey's trying to tell his dad, we have to be careful with overexpansion, and Ole Kirk keeps saying, we need to expand the factory. We need to have the money for this expansion. And Godfrey goes, I don't want to spend money on this. This is a waste of money. We should be putting it into production and taking more orders. And Ole Kirk was dead set on plastic. A man who went to school, didn't go to school, went to trade for wood, is abandoning wood. What does that say?
Saying that he was a futurist, and he was very he had a beat on the pulse of what was coming. And now, when we talk about kind of diversifying his his repertoire, his products, and that sort of thing, we're still not talking about bricks. We're still not talking about Lego as we know it today. When we're talking about plastic, it's the conversion of the peace pistol into plastic. His next big success was this tractor, because tractors are pretty cool.
But literally, as we go, and Ole Kirk is so hard in the head that Godfrey keeps pushing and pushing, and Ole Kirk keeps pushing back, so much so that Godfrey walks into his office one day, quits and leaves, and goes on vacation.
Yep.
For a whole week.
As we all wish to do, honestly.
I wish we could do that. I wish I could have my factory burned down 4 times and had to rebuild it bigger every time. Literally goes on vacation, puts his head together, comes back in, talks to his father, who his father has to understand his point of view. He understands the business. And Ole Kirk, when he comes back and he tries to have a civil conversation with his father goes, this is what we need to do. It has to happen this way. And they go ahead, they expand the factory, and they decide to end the production of plastic within Billund. The son-in-law decides to leave and not produce it any further because he doesn't have the wherewithal to want to produce, and decides to bring the production to Billund. And we're still talking injection molding plastic, and most of the components are for that tractor. And what Ole Kirk's idea was like a town, right? Like some type of playable. It's like almost like House, right? That is the idea that he is going for. And
Because it wasn't just the tractor. I think the book mentioned there was a couple of other things that they had as well. Um, and keep in mind too, when he started, it was the pullable wooden duck. It was things of that nature that continued as they continued um, to expand their products. So it was a tractor. It was, I believe, a dog of some sort. Uh, just like in school, I didn't take good notes.
we'll find it. It was multiple different. Where are we? Uh, we had the peace pistol. It was literally um, multiple different ideas, but nothing that was really over the moon. It was all individual pieces and parts, meaning that we're going to make tractors. We're going to make this dog. We're going to make trees and animals. We're going to make this farm. But he wanted something that was cohesive that could play together.
Mhm.
Do you see where I'm going with this? Josh, tell him where we're going with this.
Well, we're going into copyright law now,
Oh.
because what happened following the events of World War II? Old Kirk was at I believe it was a toy convention, or not even a convention, so to speak. It was like a fair, if you will, or
Like an
I
expo.
can't an expo of some sort,
Yeah.
yeah. And uh, there was an individual who had these plastic bricks, and they were just loose bricks that he had in his pocket. Old Kirk noticed because of the sound that they made as they were kind of legoing together, and the sound that I make at the beginning of almost every episode, clicking. He noticed this clicking, and it caught his attention. And as he saw these pieces of plastic, it inspired in him some new ideas. And the idea of interconnecting bricks was not his. There was a company in England that had already patented the idea of interconnecting brick pieces. However, that patent was only for England, Ireland,
And
and I
Wales.
think Wales. There was one other location or something like that, but it wasn't
Scotland.
Denmark. And Old Kirk's like, well, it's not patented in Denmark. Let's go ahead and let's get a patent on this. And that's what he did. And the they weren't yet just called bricks. He had this thought. The It's a good try. It's a good try.
Oh, you want to see what it is? Oh, can't.
No, you can't look at it yet.
Page
But it
80,
was the
Josh.
automatic interlocking brick was
Page 80.
the name that they came up for these pieces. Just rolls right off the tongue.
Correct.
Automatic interlocking brick.
It's not like that British company called them Kitty Craft or anything.
No,
No.
completely
So,
different.
with this idea, Old Kirk decided that this was the direction that they needed to move into. That they need to start producing sets and plastic pieces in the same fashion. And that's what they literally started to do. And the business started to balloon. And it did really, really well. Like exceptionally well. So much so that they started to limit the amount of production because they were overproducing in Denmark, realizing that it was time that they needed to expand into the German market, which at this point, since World War II was now essentially over, was in a need for toys.
Toys.
Yeah. I mean, kids went through a lot. Toys are where it's at. So they started to expand into the German market. And the thing that Old Kirk learned and Godfrey would learn then thereafter is that a lot of Germans had pride in German product, when they were selling the Lego in Germany, they didn't produce where it was from. So most Germans, when they were playing with Lego, thought they were playing with a German-made toy, when in theory it was imported from Denmark.
Yes. But to kind of further, and again, the amount of business savvy that Ole Kirk had and the individuals he surrounded himself with without any formal education is really quite impressive. To help sell that idea that it was a German toy, they set up operations in Hamburg. They set up their own factory. They got a German patent for the product, and started producing them in Germany. And they would go on to do this in other locations as well, in France and Italy and Sweden, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And what it did was it made Lego an international product. It wasn't a toy of Denmark, which was small and didn't have a lot of say. He put in work. It wasn't an overnight success. They were successful, yes, but they weren't enough that they would be able to move forward and cover the amount of debts from the four factories and the machines that Ole Kirk had purchased kind of on a whim without really any substantial capital to back himself up. He needed to make a lot of money to make up for all of that. And the other thing, Tommy mentioned the kids had been through a lot in the war, and they needed something to play with. The other smart piece of marketing for these new interlocking bricks was that they were showing it as families playing together. The marketing was not just a little boy and a little girl, but it had mom and dad as well.
Which is secretly Godfrey's son and daughter.
Mm-hmm.
That they used for imagery at the that they photographed in Boulogne to put on the packaging.
Once more, utilizing that great child labor
That's what they grew up
leniency.
With. So we got to the height of this. Lego's doing extremely well. Godfrey has not touched plastic since he's come back to the company after that week of vacation. But then Ole Kirk has come to a point in his life that it has completed.
Mm.
Ole Kirk passes away at the height of what, at that moment in time, was Lego as a brick system. Ole Kirk, by his community, almost every single person in his community who still owed him money did not have the ability to pay him still, and just they didn't show up because they owed him something, and it just wasn't. No, I'm playing. we learned in chapters 1 and chapters 2 that Ole Kirk did a lot of work for his community for IOUs. He never got paid for certain work. And with the carpentry, it wasn't just toys that he was making furniture and houses and what have you out of wood. Can't really think about that right now. The whole community showed up to his funeral. There are photos, I don't remember what page they're on. There are photos within the book that show you literally the whole community coming out to honor and acknowledge this man who brought the world to Boulogne, essentially, at that moment in time, with his interlocking brick system and all the wonderful wooden toys that he had created.
And even strangers, even people outside of the community that he had just run into on happen chance. It told the story of a woman who her car had broken down on a hot day. And Ole Kirk had seen them, stopped, gave the child some pieces of Lego, and just kind of shared some kind thoughts and good words with them. And it was something that the woman remembered after his funeral, that his kindness was not that of a businessman, but it was just a gentleman who had a love for joy and bringing happiness to children.
With that, you have to remember how much was on his shoulders with the business. Now Godfrey has to step into those shoes and now go into a business that he does not enjoy. And that
Mhm.
is plastic, which is now making them more money, way more money than his division within wood. And he's conflicted. Does
A
he
little bit so.
does he continue with wooden toys, or does he scrap plastic? Or does he and scrap plastic? Because he's more prone to building wooden toys.
What's also interesting at this time, following Old Kirk's passing, is the inheritance.
That
So
creates a little bit of separation.
a little bit of separation that ultimately forces Godfrey to want to consolidate the businesses. And surprisingly, he backs the plastic. Whereas other siblings feel like that's not the right move. They are bemoaning the fact that he is now seen as the head of the organization, that Old Kirk had kind of lent that business practice to him, even though they were all involved, and that Godfrey was going to be the one calling the shots. So, whereas his second son, who has a name, uh, wanted to continue with the wood and had been developing his own product for the wood branch, wanted to continue, Godfrey said, no, Lego needs to move forward as plastic.
And that is the conundrum that we are left with at the end of the system chapter. It's the idea of how does the Lego company move forward without Ole Kirk? Where does it go? Does he hold the same vision as his father? Because from what we learned, he was just happy puddling along, just working on wood. But now that the brick system comes along, they want to refine it and hone it in. Because not only with the system where you get plastic injected molded like tractors, and I'm not talking like Lego, like today's standard tractors, full tractor plus a Lego house in the traditional sense, that they needed to refine the process and figure out how to keep growing and expanding their product. Because they also talk about at the end of chapter 4, and then we're soon we're going to get more in later chapters about how we talked about how Old Kirk just, happened to come across those bricks, and that British company didn't necessarily notice early on. Well, as we get into the early 1980s, things start to change for Lego, and it gets a little bit harder with copyright law when people actually pay attention to what you're producing, not during wartime. So this is where we leave our family and Lego. Josh, you
Nothing
have
like a good cliffhanger.
anything else to add to chapter 4?
The only thing I can say is that, with the fate of the company hanging in the balance, the best thing for you all to do is to like, subscribe, and follow us. So as we move into chapter 5, which is entitled Expansion,
Ooh,
you can hear more of the Lego story.
correct. And if you haven't already, be sure to check chapters 1 and 2. I'm going to try to create a playlist so this way you can watch them in order. I'll try to keep the thumbnails the same so this way it makes sense. And if you have any notes that you'd like to add, let us know in the comments down below. If you'd like to join our book club. Also, Josh, flip it around and hold the barcode up to your camera. If you'd like, go ahead, use your phone. Scan that barcode and find this book on Amazon. It's called The Lego Story by Hans Andersen. And join us. Read with us. Let us know your thoughts. Let us know your opinions. The most important thing is, as Josh said, is if you subscribe. Because something cool happens here on the BlockCast if you do subscribe. Josh, let them know. Show them.
Well, as we have continued to expand, we are now up to 87 subscribers on YouTube.
88 as of this morning.
Ooh. we have a queue to join our studio audience, and you can be one of them.
Correct. That means if you subscribe, we will literally let you pick out of the queue your Lego minifig, and you, if you choose to, get to create the background story and the name for the figure that we add to our audience. We'll feature you here on YouTube, and we'll show you on Instagram. And if you don't want to write your story or create the name, let us know, and we'll still put one in our audience on your behalf. Because our audience, as of today, has 88 little mini figures.
Because just like Chapter 5, here at the BlockCast, we are all about expansion.
That was very good. I see what you did there. Well, with that, we appreciate you being here. Thank you for watching all the way through. Be sure to like. If you want to join our studio audience, that's cool. Join our book club. Subscribe on Instagram. Subscribe here. But this was a lot of fun. And with that, my name's Tom.
I'm Josh.
And you have been enjoying the BlockCast.
We're Lego fans. Click.
Bye, everybody.
Take care.